From the center of the galaxy, this is ForceCenter, show about Star Wars, pop culture, and the ultimate adventure, life itself. I'm Ken Napzok.
I'm Jenn Landa.
And I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
And wow, he's back. It seems like a lifetime ago. We can't bury the lead. Joseph's still on location. We are going to be doing our Skeleton Report episode, a deep dive, favorite moments, all the things. But before we even do the Audible read, welcome back to a regular rotation, sir.
I'm very, very happy to be here. I love the new little slivers of our heads. I feel like we're missing just a few members of the Brady Bunch. How's that for returning? A dated Gen X reference right off the bat. Some nice honesty there. Thank you, everyone who's been so supportive of the film that I was working on, that I'm still working on. We finished the shoot, and now I'm here in Minneapolis in my childhood bedroom, still cleaning up the mess I made in my father's home, then back to LA soon. But I'm really, really happy to be back here, and it was delightful to watch some Star Wars on a computer in my childhood bedroom, which would have really blown my mind when I moved here in 1987.
Oh, yeah. Could you imagine? Oh, a TV on a little screen? Oh, my God.
No.
Good to have
a hot little TV on your lap.
And at the end of the show, we'll still tell folks how they can still support the film as you've moved to post-production. As we've been telling people here, we're going to get to a review. And before we even get to a review of episode 3, we are, of course, going to hear a little bit of Joseph's overall thoughts on the first 2 episodes, since he was not here last time out. But as always, we want to remind you today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 and growing titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. We've been recommending for the last couple weeks Aftermath by Chuck Wendig. While we'll probably switch that up in the future, I really do love that book 10 years later. A lot in there. Download your free audiobook today by going to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Again, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for your free audio book. All right, we do have a very fun episode 3 to dive into. Again, not burying leads. Joseph, where you at? Where you at? Episodes 1 and 2.
Shockingly, I enjoyed Skeleton Crew very much. It was very, very weird to, I haven't been on social media a lot, but to just kind of see the little trickles of reactions and see the people in love with Neel, in love with his hair. I love that he's a child that appears to be wearing a toupee. I don't think he is, but it's got a toupee vibe. And I love that. The first 2 episodes I really, really enjoyed. I think they were what they said on the tin, which I mean in a good way, of it was exactly what was advertised, and with the amount of promotion that had come out, it was sort of, here's everything we expected leading up to that reveal of Jod. But there's some great twists in there. I think big picture, just in terms of mood and style, it's fun and charming, and I think a lot of what people kind of wanted based on the advertising. And for me, it's like great extremes of the buffet to go from the Acolyte, which was dark and challenging and emotional whirlwind for me, to this thing that it's got stakes. I care about these characters. I'm worried about them, but it's fun and bouncy, and they're pirates, and I'm like, yay, right off the bat, Initiative gets shot in the eye. Yay, fun. Immediately, fun. So weird mix, but it's that beautiful Star Wars violence that feels like that's safe to have fun with because it is heightened, kind of thing. In terms of like the big picture themes, I didn't get a chance to listen to the episode that you guys recorded. But some of the things that I loved, I loved that the promise of the suburbs has paid off so far. When that reveal of the suburbs came out, we had discussions on ForceCenter and in the general Star Wars fandom about like, how do we feel about suburbs in Star Wars? And we had discussed like, well, we've seen lots of different environments where, large groups of people live. We've seen like the big city of Coruscant, and then we've seen the little kind of outpost, super rural farming communities of Tatooine and a million other cities. And we've never really seen that in-between thing of a suburb. And we had discussed, like, is it going to bring in some of the anxieties of what a suburb means in the real world, or certainly some of the anxieties that I grew up with in the 80s? And it absolutely did. That it is a space of conformity and a space of comfort and safety, but lying under that comfort and safety is no sense of breaking the rules, of danger or adventure. And I loved that was our introduction to Kh'ymm and Fern that they were grasping at any little bit of freedom. And the only way to have any sense of freedom, adventure, and excitement was, by definition, breaking out of the conformity and taking a shortcut and reading past your bedtime. dangerous stuff. Yeah. I absolutely love that the suburb isn't just aesthetic. Mm-hmm. It's critique. Everything is locked in, rigid, enervating, just sucking the energy out of you. It is the only the target computer will work, Luke, Star Wars theme, except now you can actually live in it and visit it and eventually buy a playset. The other things that I really liked about the first couple episodes was the stuff that we didn't know that I think really enriched the story, because a lot of the themes, the beats of how is this all going to happen, I feel like we all kind of pieced together. The twist that At Attin is totally locked off from the rest of the galaxy and maybe a treasure onto itself. That was the thing that was like the most exciting in those first 2 episodes to me, because it was new information and it changed the overall sort of thematic game of the show to me, of all sorts of different ideas of treasure. What is treasure? What is valuable? We're building on that now with getting into lots of, financial stuff with At Attin and what's its deal with money. Last big thing for me, and I have no idea if you guys talked about this, I'm watching on my small little laptop screen on my lap in my childhood bedroom, but I feel like the show looks fantastic. And I know a lot of it was shot in the volume, and I feel like a couple things might be going on, either just many lessons of the volume learned, or this was supposed to come out a year ago. And I don't think that Disney suddenly shelled out a bunch more money, but maybe with just a little bit more time. I feel like there are a lot of touches in post-production that are maybe there because there was time to do another pass on, like, can we make this shot look a little bit better? Do we have a little bit of better angle? There's this thing in the 3rd episode today of Neel snoring and having that little beautiful weird snore. Like, it's possible that wasn't there a year ago, because that's entirely post-production sound design. So I just feel like it looks and sounds great. Also, I just feel like there are a lot of darker environments, which the volume is friendlier to shadows than the bright suns of Tatooine, where we've seen a lot of the volume.
100%. I don't want to do a full recount of check, but it's so fun. States apart and time apart. We're in line with Jenn and I. We did talk about the time allowed. One of the major problems in modern films is just the time and budget VFX teams have versus don't. And I think they were unnaturally blessed, maybe. And we don't know the inner workings, but it seems to be on the screen. Yeah, with you on the themes too. Of we talked about it being the pirate theme of surrender or die, translating to the suburbs, of the idea of conformity being you either surrender to the system or you die, and how they're fighting against that. And then Joseph, I'll be honest, I may have gone too deep. Jen, back or tell me I'm right. I went too deep into the history of Burbank being a sundown town and how the suburbs hide darkness. So maybe that was.
Yes, Burbank.
You can give me a timestamp of that. I want to listen to that in the episode. I think it's true. I think that's what they're playing with. It's powerful.
Yeah. Excuse me. Deep, and I snored like Neel. No, great stuff. We missed your thoughts as always, but happy to catch up with you here. So I think with that, we can dive into episode 3. Very interesting as an astrogation problem, directed by David Lowery. He also directed episode 2, and the writers, once again for this one, Christopher Ford and John Watts. The showrunner's quick summary trust is at the center of a faster, more intense episode as Kh'ymm, Fern, KB, and Neel are broken out of the brig by their new pal, Jod Na Nawood, who says it slightly different than we all said it, but he says it the same way. Or is he Captain Silvo? Or maybe Crimson Jack? They escape to the far side of a distant moon and seek the help of an old friend of Jod's, Kh'ymm. And we're going to talk about Kh'ymm. But as she finds valuable information on the kids' mythical homeworld of At Attin, she also raises a timeless Star Wars question. How do you know how to trust someone? Is it your gut or your head? The kids might be heading home, but they're currently sitting at the intersection of knowledge and wisdom. Somewhere Dexter Jetster is smiling. Let's get into some overall reactions. Jen, kick us off with where you go with this one here.
I was so thrilled by this episode. For me, the first 2 episodes hit so big. I loved it. My kids loved it. And I wanted to make sure that the trajectory continued in the right direction. And it did. It was so thrilling. And I had a moment where I said, did Lucasfilm know that they had this hit? Like, I feel like they were pretty, I don't want to say guarded or cautious, but it kind of felt like this is huge. To me, this is one of the best Star Wars shows that have come out. The way it looks, the acting, everything. And so I just think that that's really interesting. I feel like Lucasfilm has been a little coy, because to me, this is like knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's fair to call the promotion of it, I don't want to say muted, so maybe that's not fair, but the delay, which wasn't, we had talked last week, Jen, too, and Joseph, I don't know if you agree with this, like the delay wasn't even official, or it just seemed like, oh, it's not coming out. It's coming out later. It seemed a little weird.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like it is in the canon of Star Wars, it feels like sleeper hit. It feels like it's not Obi-Wan. It's not even the Acolyte was like had all of this sort of splash of a time that you've never seen before in the Star Wars timeline. And Skeleton Crew has always just been like, Jude Law's going to run around with some kids. It's kind of like Spielberg. Hope you like it. And it's been under the radar. And I think maybe that's to its credit.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't want to say intentionally lowering the expectations, but even I had this like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to see it. It's going to be fun. We'll see what's going on. I don't know. And I'm over the moon as well, Jen, there. So any other final thoughts, Jen? I don't want to take your overall reactions from you.
No, I can't wait to show my kids. I think that, but I will say Jude Law is such a wonderful addition to Star Wars. And I knew that he would be. He's such a fantastic actor, but he really does bring a magic and is able to tell this story, which can be a little complicated. I might be telling my kids a little bit about what's happening. But I just think he plays that rogue so well. But I also want to trust him, but I don't trust him. And I don't care because I'm just going to go along for the ride because it's Jude Law and he's wonderful.
I off air had a couple conversations with some friends where I was like, turns out movie star is movie star. and I don't have a ton of skin in the Jude Law game. I know my fiance walked past and said, Jude Law's in this. He cheated on Sienna Miller. I'm out. I don't have any skin in the game and I don't want to defend him off. Okay. I get it. But Joseph, you mentioned that word charming of the first two episodes. The charm level got even higher with him, and quite frankly, I'm in love with his performance, but that's just me. Joseph, your overall thoughts to episode 3?
Yeah, I'll start with Jude Law. I haven't read his Wikipedia, so I don't know what poor life choices he's made as a human being. But I thought in particular, like he did a great job in his little cameo at the beginning of episode 1, which I also thought was great to sort of like let us hear Jude Law's voice right at the beginning and know like, oh, he's a pirate. So whatever else is going on with his Force stuff, he's a pirate. This episode is where he really got to shine, and I thought that all of the Jedi stuff, and we can talk about whether he has any Force abilities or not, blah blah blah, but the joke of him as sort of like the Obi-Wan figure who is clearly not Obi-Wan, that could have been so deeply overplayed and got hammy, and I think he kind of played it just right of sort of like, this is about the level of pretend I need to do to trick these kids. And then the moments where he was alone, his fear and anxiety and questioning himself and looking for comfort by finding a big knife, all of those things felt very real and honest and small when he was alone. So I thought he just made a lot of great tonal choices. It's a deceptive performance. There's a lot going on in it in this one episode that we got with him. So I thought he did a great job. So for overall thoughts on episode 3, I'm really interested to watch the structure play out because with the kind of streaming service thing we've talked about a lot of the streaming service shows feel like they're structured like a film that's then broken into these little parts. Whereas like Mandalorian is one of the few that's really made a huge effort to be, yep, there's an ongoing story, but this episode is this episode. In the first 2 episodes really did feel like this is act 1. This is all the stuff that you mostly knew in terms of just plot. And this felt like a great break into act 2 where like, okay, now they are in the new world. They're with new people. And now we're getting into the meat of them actually having to make decisions of how are they going to respond to the new challenges, the new questions. I thought the tone of this episode, it was there in the first 2 episodes, but I thought the tone of this episode was really interesting, and it might be totally subjective. I think it is charming and whimsical and fun. There are pirates and jokes and all, and really good Star Wars action of like, the action's a little bit more inventive. I feel like I haven't seen that a million times, and it comes fast enough and all that. But with all that sort of great Star Wars action and comedy and whimsy, there's a little sense of melancholy to it all, to me, which I really, really love, because I think it's what's giving weight to all of the fun stuff, so the fun stuff doesn't just float away. There's this sense to me of like, the kids are in physical danger. There are high stakes. The parents are worried about them. But I'm not really worried moment to moment that like one of the kids is going to be stabbed through the heart and die, right? Yeah. I'm worried about their emotions. And what's at stake for me, and why it's giving it a little bit of melancholy, is there's this fact of innocence lost. They were in a locked away planet. They were locked in specific lives. Now they're out in a galaxy that they didn't even know existed. We have this benefit of knowing it so much more when they have that, like, whatever it was, like 10,000 worlds, and you want to go, no, there's even more. You don't have any idea how big this is. So innocence lost is, yep, that's for sure happening. But then, is that innocence lost going to be the sad loss of naive perception, or is it going to be an empowering loss of innocence? And I thought this episode really played well with moments of sadness, where they were like just children who needed to be taken care of as children. They needed to be fed and they needed to have their nap time, where they were children. And then those moments where like they needed to be empowered. They needed to feel like they could be the bosses, that they could be in charge, that they could handle this conflict. And that's all the kind of the surface stuff. But for me, the real melancholy comes in to we'll get into the bigger themes, but for me, that's the biggest thing that affects me is, this idea of how are we going to feel about being adults? That, Star Wars as a metaphor for everything else. This just really felt like a great coming of age thing of like, do all adults lie? Are all of our home lives full of dishonesty that maybe they're treasure, maybe they're not? Can we trust this adult? Do any adults trust each other ever? Is this what an adult is? Just lying to one another forever. There's a melancholy to the way they're being introduced to the galaxy that I think it certainly replicates like what I experienced when I got to about like 13 or 14. And I grew up thinking, well, I understand the world because Mr. Rogers in Sesame Street explained it to me. And then like, wait, most adults do not do any of the things that Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers told me. And how am I going to stay optimistic and positive and try to be the person Mr. Rogers asked me to be when that doesn't appear to be how adults largely function? There's a real worldness of the excitement and the sadness of having the veil lifted as you become a teen that I think was really palpable in this episode.
I love what you're saying. That first of all, you're broadcasting from Minnesota, home of the Replacements, who wrote so many wonderful, loud, sing-along power pop songs that are just melancholy, based around, is this it? Is this what happens? I love that. And Jen, maybe you can jump in here too. But I've been saying for a while, Jude Law's character, whatever his name's going to be, represents a sense of loss of magic and wonder in a show that's about that, but playing it against what you're talking about, the growing up angle, just the hunger pains of doing it. Yeah, I'm picking up on the melancholy vibes as well. I'm not getting lost in it. It's just part of the DNA of this show. And Jen, as a parent who looks at your kids, are you melancholy? Would you love?
It's interesting because I actually only see the melancholy more from Jude Law, more so than the children. And I think that's based on Kh'ymm's reaction, because Kh'ymm is the one that's the most invested with Jod being a Jedi, right? Like KB and Fern are they already sus. They know that he's sus, right? And I love that. I love that because kids pick up on that naturally, right? They're just like, something's fishy about this person. And they're a little bit more worldly than Neel and Kh'ymm. But even when Kh'ymm figures out that this guy can't be trusted, he's still, the way that he says it, he's like, I don't know if we can trust you. Like, it's not like a sadness, but it's more of just like, I don't know. I think that they've already kind of experienced adults not being like, they know that adults can lie, and they know that adults can say one thing but actually mean another. And so he's not as disappointed as I think he may have been if he was totally a dreamer. I mean, I think he is a dreamer, but I think he does have some awareness, which is good, because I think a lot of kids are very clued in with adults and what's happening. So
Yeah,
I don't know, but with Jude Law's character, for sure, there is this like lingering sadness when he's looking around the ship, and I'm not sure if it's like because of his old life, or what he's doing, his current life, or his future. I don't know, but there's a lot of heaviness there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do like that Wim does seem aware that, you know, whatever the great work is, that is the most important thing to his dad, and Wim is an afterthought. And I think what I'm thinking about is like the moments where, you know, KB has always processed the world in a certain way, and now she's not sure if she can continue to process the world that way. And we haven't gotten to whatever has made Fern so guarded and so not naive.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me it's less any specific moment of melancholy passing over the kids' faces, but looking at kind of where this is all going, when it's not just Jude Law can't be trusted. It's, hey, if we get home, we got to ask our parents if they've been lying to us our whole life, if our society, if everything that we stressed about is just not real, like with what the great work is and what the options are. And yeah, I feel like there's a little bit of a reckoning. I think I think there's going to be some "you lied to me, mom and dad" before this is over.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. No, great stuff there. Any other overall thoughts there, sir?
Last one for me is just, I guess one of my only sort of critiques of part one and part two would have been, I felt like there was enough room to get to know KB a little bit more, because we got to know the other three pretty well. And I was really glad to see that this episode was a little bit more KB centric, and we got a little bit more of her perspective. If not her backstory, we saw her parents, and we saw the way that she processed things, and there was a little bit more of a focus on her, which I thought was great.
100% agree with that one. Quick notes for me. The magic and wonder of this show continues to dominate. I think it has big myth energy that is staying true to these real smaller, more intimate kind of goals of the show. Some of the stuff you talked about there, don't need to remix it, but love that's going on. Just on the technical side, I really enjoy the editing and the episode's energy levels, which that sometimes gets confused with the word pacing, which I think we often talk about in terms of the script, the dialogue, the writing, and what scenes do to move the story forward. Just faster, more intense is at play here, but a lot of that is the editing. There's a great momentum to the episodes. I could put this in favorite moments, but I think there's too many. I'm just going to say overall my reaction is the Neel humor just continues to win, where he wasn't front and center in this episode as much as the first two. No baths to be taken here, but you know, picking up a blaster and kind of putting it down and his eyes going big. He being the real, everyone's hungry, but he's growling. Feeding the rat, the care he's taken for the space rat. These tripping and falling in the background where they're getting down the hill, like these little character moments. He has won over the Star Wars fandom without a doubt. But they continue to build it in the most wonderful, and again, you said it, Joseph, charming. Charm comes up a lot in the show. So I love that there. We'll run through some favorite moments. We're going to get into our theme talk. That's where our meat and potatoes are often found on our ForceCenter meal. But in keeping with the overall vibes here, just some favorite moments. I'll start off saying I love the escape sequence, the gas line, everything about it. High Star Wars action with some Star Wars comedy, too, when that gas line hits. And everyone's like, oh, I found myself smiling at the violence against pirates.
Yeah.
Few of mine, but Joseph, some of your favorite moments?
Yeah. I kind of tried to break them down into things that hit me because they're a little bit more meaningful and like just way more little nice comedy moments than I could possibly write down. A favorite moment because they're just so small and visceral and real. And I think it goes to pacing. Pacing is never about like how many things happen a minute. It's in the slowest scene or in the fastest scene, is the audience leaning forward because we have a question about what's going on in this scene. Like the scene where Jod is just wandering the ship and sort of gets he finds that knife and gets confronted by SM-33. You could say like, well, that's a slow scene in a fast-paced Star Wars thing, but it isn't, because we're leaning forward going, what is his deal? What is he feeling and why? all that kind of stuff. Anyway,
Great.
I loved the moment where Jod was just chowing down on that food, and you had that great, really real world anxiety of like, he's not going to feed the children, and they're looking so hungry, and it's like that's some dark comedy, and that there's more in the pot was just so small and visceral and real, and I think one of the things that is making this not just feel like a kiddie show, because it's such an adult perspective of like, feed the children, and the fact that it's like a big moment for him, right? Because it could have just been like a joke if he just threw the pot down and then Neel looked and his stomach growled, and like we would have accepted that as a fun little comedy moment. But the realization that he's aware he should feed the children and did, that was a really great grace note to go like, he's a scoundrel, but okay, he's not a monster. He made enough for the children. So I love that. I loved at the end, we'll talk about more in the themes, how much Jod empowered the kids for the escape. And not just in general, but like saw them enough, knew them enough to give them assignments. Of like, all Neel's going to be able to do is pull this joystick back and forth. So go to town, kid. Just shake it. Just shake the joystick. That's what you got the coordination for. He can see that KB is smarter and knows numbers, so he's getting her to monitor hyperspace and help with like the real work. And then Kh'ymm and Fern to fire. Kh'ymm because he'll find it whimsical, and Fern because she's a little hard ass. I thought that was great moment of here's what could work. Here's where they could start to feel excited, get past the fear to the wonder of being part of the galaxy. I thought that was great. Other than that, mostly just some comedy and action moments for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, some of your favorite moments that popped?
I love the blue oatmeal. I thought that was so funny. And there's just something about when characters eat in Star Wars. It's really a moment to get to know the characters. What are they eating? What is the context of how they're eating and like what's going to happen? It just was it's a moment where I was like, oh yeah, that's right. They're kids. They need to eat, like you guys are saying, and that they need to sleep. And there's no hiding that with kids. They're going to let you know. I love the music on the observatory moon. It felt very 1960s sci-fi movie TV show, like Star Trek kind of vibes. I thought that was such a great touch. There were a lot of fun jokes for us Star Wars fans. It can't smell as bad as, and I'm like, Tauntaun! Or, did we win with the battle droid?
Oh, God, yeah. So good.
God, that was so funny because I assumed it was going to say Roger, Roger. And when it did that was just genius. And then we'll talk about Kh'ymm and her introduction. But boy, was that shocking. It was a shocking reveal. I had totally forgotten about that character.
Yeah, really agree with that.
Love the comedy moment with the droids. That whole scene had like like a improv scene kind of vibe. Like, you're all droids. What would you say? Just we must save the prince. I cannot see. Just everything about it worked. The Matthew Wood back. I love that. I'm with you all there. Joseph, you mentioned it. KB again, I think is at a thematic core here in this episode. And it was definitely on the sidelines first episode. Present, but we didn't learn much about her. So now from her mom's to a little bit of her maybe health history and where she is now. Love the use of her. That scene with her and Jod. My buddy, our buddy, friend of the show, Alden Diaz, texts me and goes, I know you like that scene. That KB and Jod scene is a Ken scene, and it is, and ties to the themes. Love that. Love the little Alfred Molina's Benjar Pranik, the former shipmate with Captain Silvo. You're the best skipper I ever had, but there's a chance he still killed him to escape. I just thought there was some warmth there, and Alfred Molina having a little spot in Star Wars. Comedy moment, Kh'ymm calling Jedi defenders of peace and justice, and then Jod hurt someone off screen. Wonderful. Final big thing for me is I love the explanations this episode had coming fast and clear. We always say this, theories about Star Wars we love them. We have them. We might make some predictions here in this episode. But we always say here, almost to the point where I almost feel like a Carrie Condon's character before a test, or a little bit like a droid giving it a test. I don't want to be a schoolmarm, but I love your wild theories. But why? How does it work when it ties to the themes of the show and what the show's trying to do? And other than that, I'm not too interested in your theory. And the fact that this show kind of, in this episode, was like, all right, he's not a Jedi, but he's using the Force. We got to figure out why. Why didn't he escape? Well, because he needed a ship. Duh, he says it. He's Captain Silvo. He's also Crimson Jack. At Attin is hidden and probably about money. It hasn't answered everything, but when you address it in a clear and concise way, like I felt this episode did, it leads to the why now it's less about what is going on at Attin, but like you're saying, Joseph, what's the kid's relationship to what's going on at Attin? That's more valuable to me, and I thought this episode did a good job of kicking that theory, those theory balls down the line a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's doing a good job of asking the audience to ask the questions that the show wants, and I think particularly in the sequel era, I think we as fans kind of ran with the questions that we wanted to be, and maybe they weren't the questions, in my opinion, that Force Awakens wanted us to ask. And that's a whole other thing. But for me, this is like, yep, it is centering us on the specific questions that matter, and I'll get down to sort of what do you value, what is a treasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I want to be clear, because I got friends who deal in theories too. It's fun. I have them too, or I wonder, and I love hearing a wild theory. It is Darth Jar Jar, but why? What is the value of that? And I really like what you said earlier, Joseph, about a lot of these theories. You have to look from the perspective of these kids stepping into a larger world and what's their relationship to them. And then, he's Captain Silvo. I think we all picked that up. Good, we know that. But what's the point behind it?
Yeah. For me, a couple other comedy moments. I'm really loving SM33, just in general, and right behind Neel, he's the comedy hero for me, which is weird because what I'm loving about SM33 is I feel like Star Wars has fallen into a little bit of a trap, sometimes on shows, but a ton in the publishing, where droids have been so successful at being plucky, funny, weird sidekicks, and I feel like there's been sort of a struggle to keep them fresh sometimes when they're sort of variations of the classic R2 role. SM33 just feels like a character who happens to be a droid, and I think that's making SM33 pop more for me because he's got perspective, he's got agency, he's got mystery, he's fulfilling some of this role of like funny sidekick beats, but structurally he's not a funny sidekick at all. He's a character with perspective and a mystery. That said, here's some fun lines. I loved that he got taller just to intimidate Jod. I'm taller than you was great. I loved him pushing the oatmeal away off the table. That was great. I really like Neel's line of, and don't forget about the rat that lives in his eye hole. I'm so glad that wasn't just a sort of like, it's the snake from Raiders, right? Coming through the sky. I'm so glad that the rat wasn't just like a scare moment out of, Indiana Jones and Goonies, but is like a recurring character. That we'll be buying a plushie of eye hole rat, I'm sure. Great. I also thought a lot of Neel's comedy was even more successful in these episodes to me because there was a lighter touch. And it was a little bit in the background. I liked it when they were having the conversation about what to expect from Kh'ymm, and Jod was explaining the idea of being rhetorically stabbed in the back and said, "Does that make sense?" And Neel just shook his head no quietly in the background, like, "It's great. Doesn't always need to be loud and tripping." The quiet head shake was beautiful.
Yeah. One final moment I wanted to kick back to you, Jenn. You bring so much more to this show than just being a parent, but as the only parent, I love the moment where Fern is like, "But I'm not tired," and then is immediately passed out. Did that ring true just overall for you?
I guffawed because I had that exact conversation with my kids last night, and they're both like, "We're not tired," and I'm like, "Go to bed," and I was in the other room, and then all of a sudden it was like, I could hear them. They were dead asleep within minutes. Oh, that was such a great moment.
Love everything about that. Well, with some favorite moments out of the way, we're going to dive into Star Wars themes. It's one of the things we love doing the most here. And Joseph, without a doubt, I'm the first in line to say you always bring such wonderful insights. So take us through some of your favorite themes here as we start this discussion on themes.
I mean, I feel like that this episode really continued themes. I don't think there's any like deep hidden stuff. I mean, you said it in your summary, Ken, but I'd love to just talk about trust because I think that is the central idea of this episode, one of the central ideas of the show. And I thought it was interesting. all of the number of ways that it represented the sort of blatant, can they trust Jod Na Nawood? But like I was saying, there's so many direct relationship-based trust issues, but that larger idea of, is this what it means to be an adult? Because so far, the only person that they can trust is SM-33, and that's based on a lie. That
Right.
he thinks she's the pirate captain, and he thinks he's just following his programming. KB got that moment of bonding with Kh'ymm in this episode of like an actual adult they can trust. Otherwise, they have reason now to question their actual parents and their entire society, and every other adult they've met they cannot trust, down to Jod is having to give them a speech about, here's an important thing to know. Adults stab each other in the back, sometimes literally, but always rhetorically. That just that's such a bigger idea of trust than just these one-on-one relationships. So I think that there's the Jod thing. The only one who trusts him kind of is Kh'ymm, but that is based on Kh'ymm's projecting his fantasy on him. So there's an interesting thing to me of like, can you actually call that trust? It's not actually trust. It's denial of him needing Jod to be his storybook character. The entire pirate world is built on a lack of trust. Even to the point in the previous episode where, the Thelene woman wanted to rescue them, but maybe the way she said, "Are you kids?"
Right.
feels like maybe she was also going to sell them. The truth of the great work, obviously, is under suspicion. But one of the things that I thought was interesting in this whole trust idea that I wanted to ask you both about is, in the first two episodes, I was pleasantly surprised to learn that this was two groups of kids getting to know each other, that it wasn't they had all known each other since they were in space diapers. I feel like they are starting to trust each other, but I thought that was one of the trust things at stake is, do the kids trust each other? Jen, how do you feel about the kids? Do you feel like by this episode that all four of them are trusting each other, or are they just sort of bonding because they're the closest thing to safe?
I think that there will always be a layer of them not trusting each other, the two friend groups, just because, those stinko boys or, or, whatever it may be. But right now at this moment, it's life and death. And so they have to come together and work together. But they still have their little bickering moments, which I really appreciate when we saw that, where it's like, well, what was it when Fern and Kh'ymm were arguing about? I forget what it was, but I was just like, oh, I'm glad that relationship is still intact, because that's very truthful and authentic.
Mm-hmm. Even when they're fired, when they're firing the X-wings, that's my shot.
That's it. Yeah.
There's that competitive kid things, which even started with all the claimsies in that. Yeah. So there's something competitive there, but I mean, I feel like it's less like a lack of trust in terms of the kids think they're going to backstab each other. It's almost like they have one another's numbers so accurately because they understand other kids that like there's maybe not even a lack of trust, a lack of faith in Kh'ymm, like a certainty that Kh'ymm is going to make a bad decision based on his misplaced trust in Jod. So it's kind of a lack of trust, but it's more like, I just like that it goes down to like Kh'ymm and Neel can kind of trust each other, but Neel also is like, Kh'ymm, you're getting me in trouble. KB and Fern are clearly looking out for each other, but the four of them are still kind of coalescing into their own little unit of trust, along with SM-33.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and we did discuss that too, of just having some joy out of these two competing groups, and it works in a lot of ways. And I think, again, you frame this show a lot through the these eyes of these kids out in the larger galaxy. This episode has a lot more of the into the larger world. Well, there's 1,000 world stuff, and I think that's the bucket we're playing in. In terms of trust, I love, like, I wrote down a note of like, you got Kh'ymm, not versus Fern, but Kh'ymm and Fern representing hope, maybe cynicism, the head, the heart and the head, and just because they have this kind of relationship, you can run all the themes through them and watch them play out as these kids find themselves. Again, KB centered. We'll get to it. I think she's got so many important moments in this episode. But yeah, I think you're right. There's great value to the structure of the friend group.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like they sort of bonded by trying to piece together what is the deal with At Attin. They've all got the information enough to know, like, okay, everybody else in the galaxy thinks that it is a treasure. They know about the barrier, obviously, but it feels like they get some amount of information from the outside world, but then we learned that they didn't even know about the Galactic Civil War and don't know that
love that.
Alderaan isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that they had that conversation, kind of putting all their pieces together and having that first moment of question is like, so we know the great work is important and we know our parents are analysts, but what do they analyze? Jenn, how did you feel about that scene where they were questioning, like, what's the meaning behind these rules that we've based our entire life and society and anxiety on?
That's going to be a very shocking reveal when eventually we figure out and they figure out as well. There's a real truthfulness to that when the kids start asking bigger questions that as parents or adults, you're like, do I really want to go down that road and tell you the ins and outs of adulthood? Because it's real dark. So to be fair to the parents, there's a reason why they have shield these children, right? But at what cost? And I just think that I love how the story is unfolding before all of us.
Yeah. Ken, how do you feel about they're starting to have a lack of trust in the world they know?
I think it's powerful. I think it's poignant. I think it's purposeful, but it also is just such a damn good scene because it comes after this. We've all gotten food and we're all joined here, and just the dawning, the slow dawning, the money. I love it. We'll talk a little bit in the canon stuff, I'm sure, of just the old Republic. I won't even say connections, but just playing with this era that fans are so familiar with. And them kind of being stuck in it. The Alderaan joke, rest in peace, Alderaan and Alderanians, but that was hilarious. I thought it was a great dawning moment. And you talk about connecting and in a show that is about, an episode specifically that is about building trust. And how do you do that? I don't want to say it's just about connected trauma, but connected questions, connected journeys. I think that was a great little moment.
Yeah, I think it's just setting them up for kind of the classic arc of, going home having changed, not just from their adventure, but like this show so easily could have been a binary of home's rocky, whatever, but it's safe and it's known. And do you want to say where it's safe and known, or do you want to go out and explore? And it's just so exciting that they're put in this place of great lack of trust of like, of course we want to get home. Of course that's going to be safer, but there's so much that we don't know, not just about home, but the lives we were supposed to have had. Of the fact they spent so much time in the first episode setting up the tension of, if you don't do well in these tests, you won't get to be, an analyst or whatever it is you want to be. That is all maybe meaningless and maybe just about money too. I like that they are starting to think like, is this about money? Because it also connects their home life to what is not trustworthy about the pirates of like, hey, are all adults just motivated by greed? Is that how everything works in the galaxy? I thought it was painful and powerful.
Yeah. Too soon, sir. Too soon.
Too soon. Other big trust thing for me that I thought was great in this episode was Jod's vulnerability at the end, which is the way I read it. Of he's manipulating them throughout, I think, sprinkling in honesty whenever he can of like, yeah, I need a ship. He might be being honest about how he's doing Force stuff. He's clearly lying about other things. But that I'm just like you, I'm lost and I'm alone.
So good.
It's like a little bit of an exaggeration. But I think his sincerity that he needs them, that he needs the ship, that he will get them home, but he wants a reward. I feel like it's the most honest he's being. So I thought that was interesting in an episode that was so much about trust of like, well, of course you can't really trust Jod, but this is the most honest he's being, which is like a little bridge to the possibility of trust, and then gets rewarded when he empowers them and they all work together. Jenn, did you believe Jod when he said that he's the same, that he's alone and lost and he needs them?
I felt like he was very, like he's stunted. He's stuck emotionally based on whatever has happened to him in his past. And I think, he's such a fascinating character because he is not nurturing. He basically is like, get your own food, get in there and shoot some things up, right? But there is that we know that he cares. We know that it is not just totally selfish. There's got to be a heart of gold within that deep pirate, underneath that pirate shell, right? And so it's just the fact that he even went back, and I know he was forced to, but to go back and get the droid, I just thought that that was such a great power dynamic between the kids forcing the adult. I've been there where the kids are like, I'm not going to do this. Fine, I'll go back and get it. Right. So yeah, I don't even know where I went with this. I got lost, but yeah.
I love what highlighting those moments of it's like negotiating with a chihuahua. You're always going to lose. And the fact that he cannot get past those kids. And yes, me might be behind him and he's intimidated by this droid. But the fact that they're just like, and KB talks about you work for us, but just he cannot get past them, which is great. It's fun to watch him just play against that. And as we're dealing with the big trust and yeah, to your question, Joseph, too, I believe him in that moment. But I think you're right. There's a bigger picture to it. He might like being alone, but I think emotionally he's coming to this realization of he's alone, or maybe he will, like you said, he's stunted, and that's part of his growth. But like even his buddy, who's like, "Oh, you were my favorite captain," he may have killed him. Again, he may have killed him to get out. We don't know. And I think that's this episode just. I like with I believe I'm Wim. I'm like, no, he might not be a Jedi. I don't think he's a Jedi, but I think he's using the Force. There's no thin invisible string involved here. I'm all in on it, and I don't even know if that's right. And I love that about what they're doing. Yeah.
And there was, I don't know, there's a sincerity to some of the little backstory we've got of, he isn't Hondo, who is, a pretty awful guy who then also likes kids.
Right.
It seems like, we got that introduction where he was so proud to lead his crew into a good score. He says to that Ishitib, whose name I'm forgetting, that I think I might finally be on to that big score I've always talked about. He's feeling like a parent a metaphorical parent who is feeling bad that he let his kids down and they threw him in prison. And that I'm lost and alone and I want to find a good score to make things right with my family of pirates, or to ever feel like I can truly be the person I claim to myself to be, which is the leader, the parental figure. That all feels very, very sincere to me because it's been built up in scenes where where the kids aren't there and he's not manipulating them. So I thought that was great. I love the, I never technically said that about Jedi, right?
Yes.
That also felt like not just weaseling, but like almost a tiny bit of guilt of like, I let you to believe that, but technically that one lie is not on me because Wim, you ran with that and I just nodded. That's all.
It's almost like he said, you watched the trailers and you thought I just was here.
You guys all thought that potato was Boba Fett's starship. Not on me. Yeah. And I think it's really important in the trust conversation that, he does have more knowledge and he does empower them by telling them the roles to fit on the ship. But I think that empowerment really starts with the I'll agree I work for you. Fine. It is a real swapping of roles and giving the kids even the illusion of being in control of their destiny for 5 seconds.
I love all the trust stuff, and I'll toss some more things in the bucket if I may here.
Please do.
Of the how it plays out, because you said something earlier I thought was right, and in a world where media literacy is sometimes a challenge, not finger wagging, but it's a challenge. I love that this show's kind of like trust is the theme, because I think it's valuable to be that obvious sometimes, especially. Again, this is not a show for kids, but it's about kids, and it's definitely aimed younger. I don't want to get into the debate that's sometimes out there about for or just with kids, but we're clearly enjoying it. I think there's valuable lessons for adults to learn in these episodes, and maybe being upfront and just analyzing as these kids step into a larger world how to trust. It starts with the parents, and I, we've been wondering how the parents will factor into the story. How much is it? Just these little blips? Is it more? I love what's going on with Wim's father, because it is the parents are being asked to trust the planet system, a system that they have been selling to the kids under the idea of surrender or die. Right or wrong, you either surrender the system and survive, or maybe you die. We don't know because the barrier's out there, all those things. But they're being asked by this droid to trust the system, and their heads are saying, great, because we know the system, but their guts, their hearts, everything's eating at them. They know it's not right. So that kind of starts this episode I keep going to knowledge and wisdom because we love Dexter, but it's just how it works. And you got KB. One of the things I thought we did learn of her in the first 2 episodes is she knows how things work, right? She's analytical. She is the one you're going to put at the star charts in the hyperdrive system. And she knows how things work. And the line of, you can't calculate everything or whatever Jod said to her is a great line that's true. But she's like, yeah, great, but also have the stats in front of me. It's your actions. And that comes into play when he's like, I wrote this line. This friend and I go way back, but I don't trust her. What a journey just that those 2 sentences are. And as Kh'ymm's watching them come in, she's like, she sees Jack's what she knows as Crimson Jack. She sees his actions. He's got kids with him, and she's like, "Oh, you probably kidnapped them." Just so you got actions, you got knowledge, you got what you're seeing, what you're feeling, and I thought there's just a great way to analyze what is trust as a Sesame Street lesson. This is a Sesame Street lesson for me.
Yeah. No, this episode was sort of that. I believe it's a Maya Angelou quote of like when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. I feel like Kh'ymm was pretty close to just quoting Maya Angelou, I think, in this episode.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's what's work. That was different work for me too. And just women Fern kind of be in the battle of heart versus head, like I said, and just kind of. KB being right there at that intersection and focusing on her, spending so much time just focusing on her face as she's processing these big truths.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk more about that. But Jenn, any other trust ideas for you? Any other ways that theme resonated with you?
I think that the KB thing was fascinating because some of us sometimes can't always trust our gut. Sometimes our gut is wrong. So you have to go like what you said. With your head, judging by the actions of what's right in front of you, running the calculations, being like, I don't know, this has a history of not working, right? And I think that in Star Wars, it always has been literally like trust yourself, quiet your mind, blah 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 blah, finding it within you. But like some of us have a compass where I cannot always trust my gut, and my compass is going to lead me in the right direction. And I love that KB represents kind of the both sides of that. But I do think her calculations are based on her gut, and the sweet spot is using both of them to inform your path forward. And I just thought it was a great moment between her and Kh'ymm.
Yeah, I really, really agree with that. And I think to sort of blow it up to the larger Star Wars conversation, I feel like it's great when Star Wars shows take wisdom from previous Star Wars myth and just sort of evolve and iterate, and it's almost like you take it like a theme and do a jazz version of it, which I feel like this isn't taking this classic theme of Qui-Gon telling Anakin to feel, don't think. I don't think it's mocking that. I don't think it's mocking Obi-Wan telling Luke to turn off the targeting computer. I think it's like adding another layer to that and going like, how did that works for the story of how we use the Force and sort of that metaphor. But how does that metaphor translate to a child growing up, and what are they going to choose? And it felt kind of pointed to me that it was riffing on the flowing inorganic versus the rigid theme that is all through Star Wars. It's classic Star Wars wisdom, being put under a microscope and twisted. The fact that the episode starts with Jod Na Nawood doing this light Obi-Wan impression and saying very Jedi-like things that sound like the kind of things that would be in a storybook,
so
but sound like to us like things that have we've heard a million times, even down to the point of him going, "That's not a Jedi thing that Jedi say." He's running a script, right?
Yeah.
Versus. So that sort of fake version of organic and flowing, and like that line about like, I waited and the Force provided. That's a thing many of our Jedi heroes would say, and we'd be like,
"True,
F yeah, you're right, Yoda. Thank you, Terrace Nube. Great lesson." But
put it on a bumper sticker.
Yeah, but in his mouth, it's BS. And then we have that the discussion of strings and magnets, which is almost this sort of like it's great real world wisdom, but in the Star Wars context, it's almost an attack on Star Wars. In a good way, because that's what Star Wars is, that like that faith that we are all connected, that there is more that we can see. Listen to your instincts in your gut and and you'll feel things. And the world is larger than we maybe see with our eyes. Don't always believe your eyes. Your eyes can deceive you. All of that stuff that is beautiful and true about Star Wars feels poked at in a great way when you got a kid going, "It's magnets." Yeah, and I agree with you that, Jen, that I think ultimately what this show is coming towards is like, well, you need to use a mix of those things, and maybe different people need different things, and particularly maybe children. Children can't necessarily just be told to trust their gut, because their gut's still developing, is the thing that makes sense to me. Ken?
Well, Jen, I was going to pitch something to you, but I don't want to cut you off, of course. But no. Joseph, I love it's an emotional canon alert. This is kind of almost exactly what we mean when we talk about emotional canon around here. Going to Luke turning off his targeting computer. That is a great mythical lesson, a timeless one, where we can point at the screen and go, see, that's what you do. But I feel this show is having fun, but also being having some valuable moments of, let's show the work. Let's show that math to lead to your point, Jen. And you yourself just mentioned, hey, I'm an adult. I got 2 kids, and I don't know if I can trust my gut. There's lessons for you here. And how's it? I was going to ask how that specific stuff of you've grown up knowing just turn your targeting computer off and fire. It's easy. But this show's going, let's run through some calculations on how to even make that decision.
Yeah, so I believe I'm neurodivergent, because it's like neurotypicals are like, come on, it's easy. Just do this. Just quiet your mind. I'm like, do you have any idea what's going on in my mind? I cannot quiet it. I am like KB. I understand. I'm running the numbers and doing the calculations. And so I feel like it's a much more pragmatic approach. And it's speaking to those of us, I would love to be like a Jedi. I aspired to be like Luke and Leia, right? But the reality is that many of us were not. And I think there's something within kids, even if I can just think about like when you take kids to go see a magic show, right? And the magician's like, oh, do you know how I did this? They're like, you did that. Like they want to label, and they want to like uncover what the secret is, what the magic is, how you did that trick, right? And here, that's why I love Fern, because she's like, it's this, it's that, it's this, is that. She's very cynical. But I think that that's also an adult thing. Sometimes it's like you sit down to watch a Star Wars show and it's like, surprise me. I know I've seen all this stuff before, right? And then we get pulled into the magic. And so it really is like this push and pull that I really, really love that this show is dealing with.
I mentioned the Sesame Street thing. I'm joking, but also I think there's some truth to like today's episode is brought to you by Trust. And that's why I would not, with any aggression or anger, push back against anyone who's like, it's just a kid's show. Because you're not wrong from the surface. Absolutely not wrong. It is a lot of ways the truth of it. But I mean, I think this is the right time, especially into an era we're leading into, of just like, you got to reconnect with what you were built on. And we're all Jod. And Joseph, you highlighting some of Jude Law's best work for me in this episode of like, that's what a Jedi would say. And then we're like, no. And you just see his eyes kind of go like, I know, oh, God damn it, they're right. How do I get past this? But how do I work through it? And I think that's the value in it. I'm not going to leave that probably in every review of through these 4 kids, we are seeing ourselves. It is a mirror reflected to us on as cynical, broken down adults who are stuck in a system we have to trust. We might die. I think that's the great value of the show for me.
Yeah. And I think that finding balance in those perspectives of seeing the good of being analytical and seeing the good of being intuitive, the show, I think, is set up to really have a lot of great experiment with that. I think this episode, seeing KB is very analytical, and it is really great for detecting BS of like, I'll look up the numbers, and the numbers say you're full of crap. Like, I don't know what number she was running about him being a Jedi, but she's like, there were this many before the purge. Like, I don't know if she had any math to that, what her math was, but so great for detecting BS, not good for taking a leap of faith. And we haven't necessarily KB run the numbers and go, this is safe. It's worth the risk. So far, we've only seen her kind of run the numbers to go, this is what we shouldn't do. This is what we can't trust. And Kh'ymm is kind of on the other side of that of, I think eventually the kids are going to have to take a leap of faith. They're going to have to trust their gut. And right now, his absolute belief in intuition and magic and romance is being presented mostly just as a threat because he's not seeing clearly who Jod is. But they're both being teed up, I think, to find more value in the way that they perceive the world. And I thought that was one of the great things about Kh'ymm, beside her great design, besides her great line about picking their little brains clean, was I feel like Kh'ymm was a little bit, she had the explicit lines encouraging KB, but also in just what she did. Like she had all of that data, all of that information at her claw tips in the computers, but she didn't just put in numbers. She just didn't type in At Attin and have space AI give her the answer. She was being intuitive and clever about it, of what's the right question to ask these kids? What's on their bodies that I can use to be, flowing in organic? And then I put the information in the computer. So I thought Kh'ymm was this great balance of being flowing on organic and relying on analysis and numbers. So I thought that was really cool.
Absolutely. And yeah, going forward in our own worlds, it's going to be valuable lessons. Perhaps some at the top might need.
Yeah. Another thing in this, the sort of feeling versus knowing, knowledge versus wisdom, that it isn't just about the kids growing up. It's about the society of At Attin. Those first episodes, like the first episode in particular, some of the language they used scared me. I don't even remember it, but it's so rigid and controlled, and past this and you will become this function in the great work, and no discussion of what the great work is. At Attin is, as a society, is obsessed with numbers and systems and rigidity, but not the meaning behind it. At Attin is all what and no why. What do they analyze? So I feel like, again, the show is just like with the idea of trust. This isn't just like, oh, it's KB's little journey to figure out knowledge versus wisdom. It's clearly at the heart of the show.
Absolutely, at its core. I don't want to. This show's also fun and charming and an adventure and whip smart. But and look, this is what we do around these parts. But this is connecting it to our lives, and this is also analyzing one of the greatest franchises and sagas ever told that we're here for weekly on a basis. I don't want to speak. I don't want to be hyperbolic, but it's like I'd love that the show where something like your bumper sticker, trying to get your Last Jedi take Joseph into a bumper sticker is kind of like, it is a movie that asks the question, the 4 key things of Star Wars, breaks it down, asks is it valuable, and builds it back up again to say yes, right? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to summarize that. I think this series, 3 episodes in, for me, this is a personal take, has said, what are the big lessons that Star Wars has taught to kids? Because that's what the creator, the man in flannel, says it's about. Let's analyze it. Let's show how that works, and let's show how that continues to connect to your life. You, sir, just made, I don't want to get too far down into your own books here, but you just ran all the calculations on your idea to make a movie, and probably a lot of them, the answer was no, and you felt, I still have to take that leap of faith. Star Wars' lessons are still at play in your life to this day, and I thought, I love that the show's doing that.
Yes. Trying to make an indie film, every calculation in the world is, unless you're already privately wealthy, absolutely not. It is a horrible idea on every level. Don't do it. The only reason films, and I think a lot of art, exist is because people do take a leap of faith and they do trust their gut that this idea is good, and that anyway, we'll go
down there. I don't mean to put you on the spot there, but it's just like I know what you've gone through, and I'm like, you are in that X-Wing cockpit and the targeting computer is on. We all are. What do you do?
On paper, no one ever believed in Star Wars in the 70s. Even the guy who famously did the green light is like, I didn't know what he was talking about. I just had faith in him. Star Wars only exists. All of this only exists. That amazing backdrop that Jenn has, that I'm very jealous of, only exists because of total leaps of faith. Lucas in himself, Lucas in the public, that they would that if he made something he loved, that they would love it. I'm forgetting the name of the executive that in the great documentary, he was like,
Alan Ladd Jr.
Alan Ladd Jr. Yes. Who's just like, I had no faith in this. I took a leap of faith. So I feel like the show is, I think we'll get into our predictions, but like, I would love it if Jod Na Nawood is like, I actually can use the Force, but I've walked away from any principles of it, or I never was a Jedi. And like, it would be this interesting whim being partially validated. My final thought, kind of on the big picture of the themes of the feeling and the knowing, is analyzing all of it. All of it comes back to, this is a story about coming of age. This is about 4 kids wander into the dark forest, the big world. They have to get past the fear to discover the wonder. And I think the kind of twist on that classic myth that the show seems to be playing with is just this big question of, so what is the galaxy like? What can we expect as adults? Not just about trust, but what is the galaxy? Is it cold, hard numbers that can be analyzed and a correct choice can be spat out of a computer based on our numbers? Or is it messy and organic? Is it every challenge we confront is going to have an unclear answer? We're going to have to use numbers. We have to use our guts. We're going to have to trust people we aren't sure. Is that the adventure of being an adult? And I feel like ultimately Star Wars is going to come around to, like, analysis is an important tool and trust is an important tool. But the truth of the galaxy is, it isn't what At Attin is claiming it can be. It can't be entirely controlled by tests and systems in rigidity. The truth of being alive is that it's messy and organic, and you're going to end up in all sorts of choices where it's like unknowable answers, and we got to try. And I'm really excited to see where the show goes on that question of how these kids feel like, what is the galaxy by the end of this?
I love it. KB saying this moon is cold, but not being wrong, but also ending with a little bit of a friend. Kh'ymm saying, call me anytime. That's it for me on themes other than friendship versus love, which we talked about, but I love that being key, and going back for Smee, going back for the rat. Like, don't forget the rat. Love all that.
The eye-hole rat. Eye-hole rat.
Yeah. And Jod just having, whether how sincere he is, we discussed, but the fact that you're seeing a lifetime of kind of treachery, scoundrelism has left him alone, where a lot of people who are his friends, even Benjir, you're the best captain I ever had. Gonna turn you in though. Like, he is alone, and I love how that's playing out versus friendship.
Mm-hmm. Any other big theme thoughts for you, Jennifer?
No, I just think that, the kids are having an awakening, but the parents are also having an awakening with that moment where they're wanting the security droids to do something, but droids don't have empathy, or the empathy that they're looking for. And I think that they're realizing that maybe they've signed up for something that is not the best for everyone. So it'll be interesting when the kids come back, and is it going to be the kids that change their mind, or are they going to rise up together and make a change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love that.
Love it. Well, is that our theme discussion?
I think so.
A robust one, which this show is dripping with themes. I love it. Love it all. Thank you, sir, for all that. And Jen, we love, all of us love, but you have a special connection to costumes and creatures and characters, and off air and on. We got ourselves an owl friend. I haven't looked at the details of the species and everything. Looks like Aaliyah Salkat played her. But Kh'ymm, we had seen in trailers. A lot of people wondering. We got Kh'ymm, and I don't think we're done. I think KB will make that call at some point. But where are you at with this character, the design, and everything about this wonderful Star Wars weirdness?
Kh'ymm's introduction was genius, because I had totally forgotten that there was an owl in this show, and I was envisioning, based on the voice, I don't know, like an older lady. I don't know what I was, a hippie kind of woman. I don't know what I was envisioning, because there was some flirtatiousness going on between her and Jod. And I love that she had an eye stalk droids right outside.
Yeah.
And then when the reveal, I had to pause it, because I was laughing so hard that it was the owl that I had speculated was like a Blathers type of, from Animal Crossing, dignitary. I was so wrong. And then I had to look up, wait, who's voicing her? And Aaliyah Shawkat from Arrested Development, Search Party, so brilliantly played this like silliness, wiseness, kindness. I just loved everything about it. And the fact that the owl had hands, I thought was such a wonderful detail. And there were a couple moments where it actually kind of looked like there was a puppet on set. I just really appreciate that. So wonderful.
They've done a great job. I think some reveals have come out. I think Clayton Sandel's doing some reporting on like the teak being practical, but like the arm being digital, and just this. It's the themes of what we're talking about. It is the calculations of computer. It is the wonder of practical, and that conversation gets so watered down, and VFX people get frustrated, and it can be misunderstood, and some things don't work, some things are great. That stuff's kind of working for me here too, and I think I bought into the owl all the way. And look, I'm someone who historically will push back against Meeper Gascon until I love him. Will question Riff Tamson until I can accept him, and even rewatching Andor and Dewey and Freedy. We love Dewey and Freedy, but it's like that's a pretty big swing, and I give Andor all the credit, Gilroy and team, for that moment of just going, they're talking about squigglies, just go with it, and now here just absolutely accepting an owl being a key character in Star Wars. I love them. I love the design, love the character.
Yeah, I thought the introduction was handled so well. Don't want to open the the discussion can of worms of characters we know returning, but I have to admit that, like, I've got a friend. She knows a lot. Like your mind starts to go with like, okay, is Maz Kanata going to be there? Blah 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 blah. It's, anything like that. And then just seeing that little claw hand that looked a little like, the Yoda, Yaddle, Grogu species is like, it was so much build up to just something delightfully new that I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed going, maybe puppet, maybe CGI, maybe shot to shot. And also, who cares? I want to spend time with the owl character that it was well realized enough for me to not care. And I'll read about it eventually. And the great design, loved the little claw hands, and I loved everything just about the character that she was really multitasking. That she was like, I don't trust you. I need to save these kids. Also, this is fascinating, and I'm going to do some real research really quickly for my own interest in this as well. She didn't really have the same design, but she did remind me a little bit of Ogra in Dark Crystal, because there's a little bit of that sort of like map room, how does everything fit together kind of wisdom too.
Yeah, but it didn't terrify me like Ogra did, where I'm still haven't seen. I'm haunted by Dark Crystal, so
yeah, understandable.
Yeah,
pretty haunting.
I also love the set design. I don't know what was practical, what was not, but like the data pads, the stacks of the data pads, it just felt very enchanted when we walked into her observatory, and it felt, and I don't like to reference this, but it felt very Harry Potter-ish. And there was even like a music theme that was playing with this fluttering, which was very reminiscent of the Harry Potter theme. And I just thought it was just really, this was a moment where I was like, oh, I love this show so much. This is what I've been, this like fantastical, whimsical, magical side of Star Wars that I love. And it was brought to the forefront with this character and this scene. Oh, I can't wait to have my kids see it because it's just really magical.
You're right. The character design of Kh'ymm, the look of her observatory, what she's actually doing is all really putting the fantasy in space fantasy of Star Wars. It isn't like she's just looking up like prison records or hacking something. She is looking up long lost, hidden planets of treasure from long ago that might be shielded by exotic nebula. It was great.
There's a Star Wars timeline in my head now where Jyn and Cassian use her on Scarif to plug into stuff and get information. Could have been on that mission.
Kim saying, I'm in the main.
Project Stardust. Oh, ding, 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 ding. Anyways, Jen, some other thing I want to talk to you about Jod Na Nawood. Again, he said it like we said it, but he said it way more musically. I've watched it a couple times to get, it's like Jod Na Nawood. It's fantastic. He's won me over as a character. Jude Law, he is a talented Mr. Ripley indeed. Got it. But I loved the moment here. And the costume designer is Louise Mengenbach. And we actually got to see a character costume design himself. I loved watching that play out.
You seem to be struggling with his cape. I think the actor Jude Law was kind of struggling with it. I mean, he was making it look very effortless, but it just kind of kept like falling. And so he kept having to like do it, and he would do it in character, which I thought was very well done. But I was like, God, he's got to ditch that cape. He's got to ditch it and upgrade his wardrobe.
Yeah, I really love that he ended up with an extremely Lando evocative shirt when so much of this language is familiar to us from Empire Strikes Back, and it's a great look. He looks great in blue, and I like that shirt. But the Lando-ness of it was welcome for me.
My other headcanon now forming is that at some point Lando started a clothing line called Scoundrel by Lando, and you can get the shirts in the galaxy. Try Scoundrel by Lando. That's right.
Love it. Love it.
Any other thing, Jen, in costumes, creatures, characters that jumped out to you? The world building, KB, and her sleep schedule?
Oh, KB. I just adore KB so much. And I want to know what's going on with her medical condition. Is that why she has this implant thing happening? Fascinating. I was just so taken aback by Kh'ymm that she just dominated everything. And now I want to see behind the scenes. I went to Wikipedia. They don't have the species yet. I want to see Aaliyah doing the voicing. I want to know more.
I like the weird little vocalizations that were not entirely words. That one line that I really liked, we'll carry on until we've picked your little brains clean. And then she goes like, bah, bah, bah. Weird little side noises, which was a great choice.
Love that. Yeah, final one for me in the character section, the KB getting a moment to shine, but even down to what we learned from her mothers about the medical condition. For number one, that was so sad and stress-inducing if we've lost the ability to connect to her medical monitor, and how that being something very technical and rigid, and that may be what keeps her alive, but it's maybe a heart issue that's going on, just that interplay and how she has to build from that. I think I really love the character work with KB in here. Again, last week we revealed a lot of things about her in terms of she knows how things works, but we just didn't learn a lot. And I think we learned a ton this week, and really love to see the women. Fern are always going to be in the spotlight, and I don't need it to be a competition week to week, and I don't need it to be a Neel episode, a Fern episode. But I thought to make sure KB was brought up to the level was one of the big successes of this episode.
Agreed.
Now I'm worried about her. Oh no! Oh no! Because she's my daughter's favorite, and I don't want to see her in total danger like that, where she might be potentially dying and have like an ET moment. Please no! Please no! Don't make it. Don't make it that close to Amblin, please.
She just might need some pills. Is all I'm saying. But Jen, maybe you're right. We'll monitor that going forward. Yeah, as long as there's no feds in suits with cigarettes and keychains showing up, we'll be all right. Just to set up top, we like sometimes going deep into the canon connections. There's a lot. And as always, we point you to our buddies Alex and Molly at Star Wars Explained for some deeper connections. Alex has been doing the Lord's work translating Arabesh, and I know he's hard at work at this episode. A lot of stuff in there. Early reports are, he said, I don't know, there's a lot of and then. So by the time we finish this and get this up, maybe he'll have broken it down. But running through a couple moments, and Joseph, add any you got, Jen, you as well, of course. I love the Old Republic kind of shining here in the sense of it's maybe not the Old Republic that has been out there. We're going to get so much more storytelling. We'll see if Mangold gets us into the pre-Old Republic. But to just have it openly mentioned, the jewels of the Old Republic, these planets, and kind of adding to the lore or bringing new things into it. It's fun always when these creators go back deep into some EU stuff and throw a reference or a planet or hell, even Crimson Jack, which is part of the connection here. But I love that this is a small door. I'm not saying this leads to anything more. I don't need it to lead anything more. But I love that these kids just might be stuck in the Old Republic. And what a fascinating take. I love the play.
Yeah, I loved it that it was just, it makes the galaxy feel lived in. That we're on the timeline at a certain point, and historians would know about the Old Republic and mysteries, and that enough time has passed that these planets could be lost. Those are all great details.
Yeah. Jen, I don't know how many nights you spend wondering about the Old Republic, but is it scratching any itches here?
It's kind of funny because I've always it's been a thorn in my side, the Old Republic, because people often have used it to be like, oh, they should be doing the Old Republic. But now I'm like, you know what? They should be doing the Old Republic. I kind of wish that they had a show that could exist about the Old Republic that when this show ends, Skeleton Crew, that we could go right into that and get some answers or some tie-ins. I think that would be really fun. Not happening, but now I'm actually more intrigued by it, and I'm not so cranky about people mentioning the Old Republic.
Well, because they had a High Republic show that they took away. So yes.
I think with the specific timelines, I think sometimes fans sort of obsess on, if you're going to tell Old Republic, you need to tell the specific story, or you need to tell this massive event, right? You need to do a trilogy in theaters, but like, just this, like, hey, there were lost planets. It's a massive amount of time where you have Jedi running around. Like, you could easily do a show that's like, we're going to introduce 7 new Jedi characters, and we'll follow them around in a mystery of a lost planet. It can run for 8 seasons if people like it. That was part of what was exciting about, like, this is just a little mystery, one little tiny dollop. It wasn't like, yes, that was the Jedi Sith War and the Jedi like, it was not a big thing. It was a little thing.
Yeah. I don't want to. It's not the place, and it could be taken incorrect from what I'm about to say here, or taken badly. It just. The vibe you're picking up, Jen, the Old Republic definitely had a certain style, certain stories. I read the first Darth Bane book by Drew Karpyshyn, and then all the new stuff came out, and I switched over to that. It has a little bit of a different vibe. I'm not going to even joke about the dark and gritty, but it's just a different tone, which is not bad. And I think that Star Wars could use some of that in the Old Republic. But I love that it's the first big, giant, major sustained mention, and it's not even a lot yet, is this show, and it comes from an owl. So the vibe is different. And this isn't a pushback against Knights of the Old Republic fans or anything. That stuff is wonderfully part of Star Wars too. And I think overall that would be part of the story if we go back that far. But I just love the whimsy of the 7 jewels of the wonder.
And the map, like the drawings at the bottom of the map, which looked like the artwork. There was that stained glass artwork. Who was it in Wim's house? And it's like these robed figures.
It's
right?
in Forest's house. Fern's house. Yeah.
Fern's house. Yes. And I was like, oh, this is the same kind of vibe that's happening with that stained glass artwork.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I only have a couple more things, but Joseph, you said you had a couple you wrote down as well in the canon connections, larger Star Wars stories.
Well, the obvious B1, did we win? Was I thought it was great. Great to see a battle droid, and great there wasn't just Roger. For the kids being out of touch, is great that the B1 was also out of touch.
Yes.
Did we win? I also like the other droid. I haven't had a chance to look up. Maybe everybody's all over 800 canon articles, but I like just the little bit of sort of Star Wars history of catching up with a droid that was desperate to save royalty. But instead of princess, it was prince. I thought that was a great little touch. Yeah. I only wrote down 2 other things, and like I'm not up to speed. I'm not on good canon hunting patrol here by any means. I always like it when the X-Wings actually use their ion cannons,
yes,
which I have done roughly 8 million times in video games. It always excites me when I see a blue shot and the ion energy frizz out. So I really like the ion shot from the X-Wing. And I wasn't expecting Kh'ymm to be Maz Kanata or anything like that, but it did have that sort of buildup of, who is the friend? And also in other shows, whenever X-Wings have arrived, it's been somebody either we know from the story or from the creators. Again, to me, that X-Wing pilot was some guy. Maybe that's the one of the writers, and I didn't know. But I like that I kind of like the canon that it was like, is a guy. He's flying an X-Wing.
Yeah, I did. I think his name's Andy Powers. X-Wing Commander Kent, and he's a John Watts buddy. He was in Homecoming, and right. I'm with you too. I wouldn't have minded if it had been like the Rick Famuyiwa or Filoni as Trapper Wolf MD or whatever he is. You're just and Carson Teva. I love anytime he shows up, but I liked it. Stood on its own here.
Yeah, and I'm sure we will talk about it more. I'm not complaining about shows where there are a lot of connections. I think Filoni and Favreau have said that in quotes many times. They like that Star Wars. That's the flavor of Star Wars you're going to get from them. And I have no problem with that. It's nice to have this show have a slightly different flavor.
Different flavor indeed. Couple ones for me. You mentioned it, but talking about Kh'ymm and the New Republic, just a relationship with him as she's given information. little morsels as it is about the Old Republic, her being tied into the New Republic in some sort of way, and then kind of, I don't know when At Attin was blocked off. I'm going to guess it was a while. I'm not putting this on the New Republic's docket, but I thought it was fascinating to learn that. But I just like that the X-Wings, because you didn't know at first. It could have been Space Pirate X-Wings. It could have been something else. It could have been a rogue group, but it's the New Republic. And I love kind of the expansion of that and wondering why she's involved or how much or, who she's playing with or against. I love that. And then the final one for me, the mention of Crimson Jack is fascinating because Crimson Jack is a character from the old Marvel Star Wars that's, I'd say, slightly over the top, big, buff, burly, red-headed, beard and hair pirate that had something to do with the Han Solo story, leading into Empire, all that stuff. But they brought Crimson Jack back into canon with the comic about the hotel ship. I forget the name of it, the Halcyon ship. So Crimson Jack's back looking like that. So was this just a coincidence of a reference, but someone would have caught it? Is this suggesting that at one point Jude Law did have long red hair and a beard? Do I need to even worry about that? That's probably too granular, but I like the use of the name and I like the connection. We'll see how far it goes. Diving back into the Marvel of it all.
And then I saw briefly on social media the Star Tours ship was somewhere in.
Oh, is it? Okay. I missed that.
I just saw it on social media. Yeah, I don't know. I just saw I kind of scrolled by it quickly because I didn't want spoilers. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, the Star Tours ship must be in there somewhere, which is really cool.
Love that. And an RX droid being the bus pilot is the bus driver on planet is good. Getting down to the end of our conversation here, we'll look at some big questions and theories and maybe some predictions for future episodes. But I did want to open up to any questions, concerns, anything not working for you, Joseph, anything concerned about. We're enjoying the show without a doubt, but looking at this side of it as well.
No, for me, the pacing is really good so far. So far, the pacing, the structure of the show does feel structurally so far like movie broken up into 8 parts. Right. And I'm curious to see, I think next week will be really, will tell us a lot of if it just feels like, yep, this is another chunk of Act 2, which we're clearly into. They've stepped into a new world. They have to change. And if it follows sort of movie structure, there will be some more complications and it will build and they'll have a little victory and then it'll fall apart and go into the sort of all of Lost and then the third act. Or they're also set up to be like, we're trying to get home. And now we have an adventure, and it absolutely will emotionally move everything along, give us more answers. But structurally, I'm really curious next week. Structurally, is it going to be like this is the one where they go to the mud planet, fight the hand dragon?
Yeah,
structurally, or is it like they have to go here, they get a half bit of information, then they start off to the next point, and it's not as isolated in structure. I think regardless, it's going to move the characters along. It's going to move the themes along. But in terms of the structure of the episode, is it going to be more Mandalorian or more like the vast majority of streaming shows we've got where it's just another chunk of the movie?
Yeah. It's an ongoing conversation that we try to be clear, have clarity of purpose, as Saw would say, where often we're not even criticizing the writers and directors and producers. Sometimes there's stuff there was Ahsoka, Acolyte, and Andor have all had at least one episode that ended in a way that I was kind of like, oh, come on. But that's not necessarily them. And we had that one writer, forget her name, who kind of tweeted and then kind of went away after that, saying, well, we had to break up the episode here. So again, we're looking at a larger system. I think this episode, or these 3 episodes, have at least ended on bigger punches. I love this line. You won't believe where you're going. It still is. I think you're right. And I think even now there's an interview Watts said, oh, yeah, we originally pitched this as a movie. And it's not an easy thing to take your feature-length screenplay and go, chop it up. That's not easy. But it's working for me. But also at the same time, I think, yeah, we still have the larger question, Joseph. And I think you're right. And by the way, I absolutely need a hand dragon episode.
Yeah, I think the episodes have been paced well. It's just the sort of like how is the cliffhanger satisfying, which all 3 of these have been to me. So I'm not concerned about that yet.
Yeah, yeah, and it's valid criticism. We want to make sure it's not a blanket criticism against the author. And well, clear, you're not saying this. I'm just sometimes in the YouTube comment world or our Discord or anything else. Like the greatest example is this final episode of second season House of Dragon. Great season, great episode. It ended on kind of an emotionally limp moment, and then you come to find out, oh yeah, well Max cut 2 episodes, and we had a big final battle, and we had to end it. It wasn't our call.
Yeah. I don't think it's anything to do with these writers and directors are making a movie when they shouldn't. It is totally executive decision of how are we shaping streaming and what does a limited series mean to us? And those ongoing questions. It's not about the writers or directors. I think the writers and directors are doing the best they have with the marching orders that they have and the amount of money they have and how many minutes per dollar that they have to get out per week and all that kind of thing.
Well, and I didn't follow it up and see if it was more than a rumor, but there was that dialogue out there that there's a 17-minute episode in this show. So we'll see the conversation that week. We'll see what happens. I didn't follow. Run times can kind of be spoilers, so I might have spoiled things for you and anyone. I apologize, but it's out there, and it might be part of this conversation again.
There'll be a sudden surprise double episode, I think, if that happens. That is hard to get people to tune in for appointment television. Wait a week and then have 70 minutes. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see indeed. Jen, any thoughts, questions, concerns?
No, I forgot. I'm so tired, you guys. I had finals last night, so I'm like,
crap.
Yeah,
How'd you do?
Really rough. I did all right. Got an A, but it was really, really tough. So,
are you an analyst now?
I feel like it. I mean, like literally, I've been analyzing words, and so I can identify with KB. The whole length of it all. It's interesting because I think that I have become accustomed to this cliffhanger style that has emerged, right? And I'm used to it, but my kids were like, "Oh, it ended on a cliffhanger," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, of course." And then I realized, oh no, because like when they watch episodes, this is actually the first live action show that they have ever watched. They've watched live action movies. They've never watched a live action show. And so this has been a very different experience for them where they're like, they want to wrap it up with a nice bow. And then the next episode can be a new adventure. And here they're like, what's going to happen? Are our heroes okay? Right. And I like that because The Mandalorian, I had a tough time with it being like a new episode or new adventure. I was like, all right. But at some point for me personally, I was like, okay, another monster. Let's get on with it. But that's just me, I like the drama, the telenovela side of it.
Did your 9-year-old daughter turn to you and say, "Mom, what will happen to our intrepid heroes?"
Can we tune in the same time next week?
Next week, same time.
Yeah.
Oh, great stuff there. Only thing for me is a follow-up on my concern I raised last week, which is, and I think they kind of answered in a way, but we'll see going forward, where there is a lot of nostalgia baked into Star Wars, as we've discussed here. There's a lot of nostalgia baked into the show, and that is part of the conversation. I feel that sometimes, though, dominates with a little bit of misunderstandings behind the conversation of it's not just serving you member berries. It's not just saying, remember New Hope. I think there's some intentional stuff in the first 2 episodes, and I wanted to make sure the show can push back past that and stand on its own legs. It's in the Star Wars universe. That conversation's always going to hang around it. Anytime a battle droid pops up, we can celebrate it. Other people be like, they're trying to pull back nostalgia from 99. I'm not saying we're right, you're wrong, you're right, we're wrong. It's just going to always be the case. But this week, kind of what we talked about, where it's like, part of what we're doing is looking back on the nostalgic moments and presenting them from a new perspective, but still dealing with the same big emotional canon connections of your choices, the lessons learned, showing our math a little bit more. I think this week moved it more on its own legs. Not that it wasn't last week, but I think it took a little bit out of the fire out of that conversation of it's just 77 nostalgia. It is definitely built on that. It's definitely got the DNA. It's always going to have the DNA. But I thought this week took it into its own fantastical world. Joseph, you weren't here last week, obviously. Any thoughts on the nostalgia of it all and the weight of it?
I didn't feel like there was any, like the battle droid was nice, and maybe there's a couple little call outs in episode 1 or 2, but if anything, I feel like it's not nostalgia for Star Wars, but almost reckoning with the environment that people maybe grew up in, where they needed Star Wars.
Yes.
For me, it
Yes.
feels like, Stranger Things plays with it a little bit, but I don't think it's what it's concerned about. But this feels like, if anything, this is coming from a real world nostalgia thing of, hey, remember when we grew up in the suburbs and our parents didn't have time for us and we were locked into boring jobs and there was nothing else, and the only thing that gave us any excitement was riding our dirt bikes into the ravine that we shouldn't, and then I broke my arm.
Mm-hmm.
and then oh my god, I saw whatever movie it was you saw when you're that age, Star Wars, RoboCop, Matrix, whatever, a Disney movie, whatever it was, that you saw something on screen that broke you out of that conformity and made you feel alive and made you feel magic. If the show is working with nostalgia, I think it's working with nostalgia of what in storytelling brings us to life and gets us to look at our own life in a different way.
Well said. Yeah, it's not swimming in nostalgia. It's working with nostalgia. It's analyzing nostalgia. It's going back to, I love what you said there. No matter your generation, riding your bike literally or figuratively to break out of the mold. I think it's there. And again, it wasn't a huge concern last week, but it was something I brought up and I wanted to follow up my thoughts on that. Other than that, this is one of my favorite episodes, this specific episode of recent Star Wars memory. Just absolutely loved it. Again, that's perspective. That's subjective. I got pulled in almost from the opening frames of this show, and I'm here for the ride. And we're going to analyze it each week and review them as they come. But I really love what was going on here. So as we wrap up, questions, theories. I'm talking questions that the show has asked. Like, Jod is not a Jedi, but the Force use seems clear? Question mark. We're going back to At Attin. It would appear we'll spend some time there. So maybe At Attin isn't the end goal. It's part of the journey. Is it straight away? Is it Hand Dragon Monster episode next week? What are we learning about the planet? Those kind of questions and predictions. Anything, Jen, on your plate?
I was thinking about who is the person that Kh'ymm was talking to? Who is the voice?
Mm-hmm.
There was a moment where I was like, oh, is it going to be somebody revealed that we know? And it was not. And I thought, all right, that's fine. That's nice. Yeah, I don't have any predictions on the future. I'm looking forward to it.
I'll ask for one then. Do you think how soon do we get back to At Attin?
Yeah, that was actually kind of surprising because I feel like we're heading there right now. We could end there next week. But that I don't know. I can't imagine that we're going to get there that easily. It might be another episode or so.
And that might be the Star Wars serial adventure effect or just the Mandalorian effect. We're joking, but yeah, there's a lot of like,
exactly.
Go here to go
we'll
that.
Get there. At the finale, that's when we're going to get there. It's like, no, I want to have a little bit more time with it.
Yeah. I hope that, Jod was acting fast and Kh'ymm put in some preliminary data to find that, pumped out a chip, and then he shot the computer. Yeah. I hope it takes them to like a planet nearby or another planet that's obscured by a nebula. That was Kim's first draft guess. So that's my hope, is it takes them. They think they're going home and it takes them into some other, adventure that is going to force them. They're on this road of, can we trust each other? So I think that we're hopefully going to have a little bit more of a bonding episode as they face some threat. Kind of hope it's a novel threat, but it could be like, do they end up on Dathomir? Some recently dropped off Night Sisters. That'd be fun. I think getting, I think a convolution that could happen is one of the great mysteries of this show is we don't know the mystery of that ship, of SM-33's ship, what its name is, right? That was raised but not answered this week, I believe.
Well, it's the Onyx Cinder, but I think we know that from marketing,
from
Lego and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right, but I think it was raised by the characters and not known. So, like, there's the mystery of the ship, and does the ship, like, one thing I've considered is, did At Attin get set up to somehow protect the treasure that is the ship, and
right.
Is At Attin a sort of a Wizard of Oz type situation where, centuries ago, this system was set up with good intentions. Generations have chained themselves to it. And the adults, even this alleged supervisor that we can meet, doesn't know the why. is it just going on and on? And like that, even if they get back to At Attin, the question is still going to be like, why does everybody on At Attin do the things we do? It's just been handed down by generations. We don't know the why. We have to discover the why. And is the ship attached to that? Is the ship eventually going to wake up and go, actually, I want to go here? I think there's lots of potential bumps before they get back to At Attin, and in a lot of ways to explore the other mysteries that they've teased, but we haven't focused on as much.
Oh, I love that you brought in the Wizard of Oz theory, because that is pretty darn good. The mysterious supervisor that just might be a middle manager behind the curtain who doesn't know what's going on, and
little
then
droid.
and then play a little. Oh God, a little droid, but also playing into the garbage will do kind of atmosphere of this ship, the one with dirt literally flying off of it the entire. This is what you came. This is what you came in, and it having a lot more to do with what's going on there. Could very well be.
Speaking of like nostalgia and Star Wars pulling from the things that Lucas and his generation loved, that was a big part of anxiety in sci-fi, of the wonder of robots and mechanization, of like, if we had robots to do all this work, what could humanity achieve, versus what if we give too much control to mechanization? So I think it's fascinating if they might play with that now, when that is a very old 1950s sci-fi idea, but with the amount of automation and AI that we're dealing with now, it's suddenly extremely relevant. This idea of like, it's the way we live our lives. I have to do bank stuff, and I just have to do what the computer tells me to do because I can't reach a human. Mm-hmm. If that is the At Attin story, it's both harkening back to the absolute roots of sci-fi, but also extremely relevant and modern. So I kind of hope they go somewhere with that.
Love that. Well, we're never heavy on the theories here, but we love exploring the why and taking some wild thoughts, and we'll see. And yeah, I for myself think At Attin's coming up sooner than later, but this isn't even leaning on trailer footage or anything like that. But we know there's an adventure to happen. And look, there's some stuff out there. Do they end up on Peridia? You mentioned Dathomir and the Night Sisters. Mm-hmm. Could it be that connected? I really don't think it will be that connected to the other Star Wars stories, other than it's in the same timeline. But that doesn't mean it couldn't. Doesn't mean we couldn't have some references. Doesn't mean they couldn't be on Peridia. Any of it's in play, but how does it tie into the lessons learned on this journey to home and what home means? So we'll see how that comes into play.
Can I ask us to take the Jod poll? I want to know, Jennifer, do you think that he has actual Force abilities? I don't think he's a Jedi, but
yeah, I do think that he has Force abilities, as much as like KB might have Force abilities in some sense, right? And like he says, the Force flows through us all. I like that you don't have to be a Jedi or a Skywalker in order to have access to the Force and be able to use it. Granted, he's not using it for good, but he's worked hard. He's worked hard at learning the skills.
Yeah, I still am. This is not a prediction. This is a dream. This is I would love it if his story was like, I was a Padawan and I dropped out before any of the horror went down, and like that he's almost like sort of an anti-Canon of like, I quit before before the criff even hit the fan, and I every once in a while I use it in small ways to help myself, like we haven't seen him do anything huge. He moved a key and he made a little noise, right? That's
turned off the lights.
He did turn off the lights, and that one might be a remote in his pocket. But Ken, where are you at with the Jod poll? Does he have the Force?
Well, the one we know that doesn't yet is Neel, who drops the stick as he's trying to explain he makes things float. Great character comment. I am I'll say this. I'll be bold. I am firmly on the side that he is using the Force. He's got the Force. Jedi, absolutely not. He's going to not be part of an organization that would have him. He's got trust issues, but I do believe he's using the Force, and this theme of the cynic, the adult that's lost their way, the adult that's alone, trying to refine their own magic. I'm not saying he'll end up a Jedi at Luke's school. I'm not saying he and Ben Solo are going to fight. I'm just saying I think the Force is there, and I'm coming down on that side.
Awesome.
Well, there you go. Final question, as always, we ask here. And Joseph, man, this is you can answer for last week too if you want. If you could have one toy based on these episodes, what would it be? Jen, where are you going? I think we kind of know.
Yeah, Furby. Furby Kh'ymm is what I want. Since the Furby is basically an owl, and I forget what other creature, hamster owl, I think it is. So yeah, Kh'ymm, so that she can talk to me and laugh and we can have jokes together.
This is what we need. Furby Cab. I absolutely love it. I'm sure this will be available eventually. We say toy, but also merchandise, anything inspired by this. You know what? I'm going to go ahead. If I'm at Galaxy's Edge, I'm going to look for that Scoundrel by Lando shirt that Jude Law's wearing. I'm going to take it. I don't even know wear it in public. I'm not good with a low cut top there. I don't know. Too much hair popping out. I don't know. So, but I'm going to make it work. I'm going to try to be a scoundrel. So I loved his look. Really love the character's look.
It could be some real upsetting tan lines on me if I wore that scoundrel shirt. It was cut too low. So yeah, I'll buy that to sleep in. The action figure I want, which I think they're going to make they've already made a lot of the main characters. Yeah. And I think they probably wouldn't do it these days, but I would love an SM-33 that has a little lever on his back so you could make the eye hole rat pop out. Push the lever and the rat pops out.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
The other thing that struck me, I don't know why, it's just, there's those old Ben Cooper masks from the 70s and 80s, and they made some recreations. I would love an old school Ben Cooper Neel Halloween mask.
Aww.
With the hair toupee and everything.
Love that. Absolutely love that. All right, we're almost out of here, but before we do that, we're going to tell you where you can find us. We're on social media, ForceCenter Pod. We are on Blue Sky. I give Joseph and Ken Plume credit for holding the Blue Sky line for a long time, but after the election, I switched over with all my heart. A lot of fun over there. We're having fun at ForceCenter over there. So check us out there. Facebook page is ForceCenter Podcast. Instagram, YouTube. Subscribe here. Don't miss things like our vertical live videos, other videos popping out. We're looking at expanding what we do just overall, but you don't want to miss that, so hit the notification bell on YouTube. But we're a podcast first and always. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Just search, you'll find us. Merch available at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter or on Fourth Wall, link down below on YouTube. You can support us directly at patreon.com/ForceCenter. We're very close to our 420 goal. 415 goal locked in. We're going to talk about that, probably that exclusive live stream coming early in the new year. But our next goal at 420, you can help us by going to patreon.com/ForceCenter. Follow me at Ken Napzok or my website, kennapzok.com. I've been teasing, and I can announce I got another headlining set at Flappers Yoo-Hoo Room, a great Friday night show, January 10th, and happy to announce, and maybe 100% confirmed in this episode. He said yes. But he is a little busy. But Joseph Scrimshaw is going to be on the show as well. Happy to have you on a wonderful lineup of comics, sir.
I'm looking forward to it very much.
Going to be a good time. Jen, we're going to find and follow you and your Furby theories.
Oh, my Furby. I'll get into it online. You can find me on Instagram at Jennifer Landa and TikTok at Jennifer Landa 1138.
Joseph, so happy to have you back here. We are a trio at heart, and good to have you here. But you're not done with this film, and if you want to get the word out, as we have been, people can still help support the film, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So making a film is a multi-phase battle. I finished one of the fights, which is the actual production, heading home to Minneapolis or to Los Angeles. Where do I live? At the end of this week. And then I'm going to get into all of the post-production, the editing, the color correction, the music, the sound design, all sorts of work that I also still need to raise money for. Thank you for everyone who has been supportive. But if you're interested in continuing to support the film, the horror film called Dead Media, you can go to my website, josephscrimshaw.com, and there's a big link to an organization called Film North that can take one-time tax-deductible donations. So as you're looking at the end of the year and you're like, hey, I need a tax deduction, that would really help me out. So check it out if you're interested. Thanks, everyone, for all the support, and thank you, Ken and Jennifer, for holding down the fort and being so understanding while I was away for a very long time.
Hey. No brainer indeed. Glad to have you back, though. More Skeleton Crew reports coming your way. That's it for now, so trust us. We'll be back. See you next week and next time here on ForceCenter.